Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome a Hong Kong-based children's book author of many books, including the recently released On Chariots of Fire, the story of India's Bene Israel. She is the founder and director of PJ Library Hong Kong, the chair of the Hong Kong Jewish Historical Society, and a member of the Executive Committee of Global Jewry, as well as the new Kidlit editor for Judith Magazine. Please help me welcome Erica Cohen Lyons. Erica, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, great to be here this morning, this evening.
I only did a partial list of your accolades because if not, I think we would have been here all day looking at your resume and everything. So, by the way, you're in Hong Kong now, so it's the middle of the, from where I am, it's the middle of the next day. It's this odd dynamic that I feel like I'm talking into the future right now.
Yeah, I always do say that. Actually, it's so funny. I always say that to people. I'm like, I'm speaking to you from the future.
Well, if there's anything I should be aware of that happens tomorrow, let me know, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we have a lot to cover, but let's start by going back. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Edison, New Jersey.
Oh, not far from me.
So when you're overseas, I usually say I'm from New York. Well, I'd rather be, but also people kind of, overseas, no idea where New Jersey is, and certainly not Edison.
Really?
So.
They don't know where Jersey is? Okay.
Yeah.
So, what was your, I guess, your relationship as, Judaism is, as far as your family?
So growing up, my parents, we belonged to a conservative synagogue, and would go definitely like on the high holidays. And then I think that I was sort of maybe the impetus to start going more often on Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents were really, just really Jewish volunteers, really. I mean, they ran Federation for many years.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up going to these Super Sunday events, and they were really involved in like the Soviet Jewry movement.
Oh, okay.
So I think that all of that really affected sort of the kind of person that I became. And to them, that was Judaism. That's sort of how you express Judaism. So it wasn't really necessarily.
You were very involved. I mean, you were very involved in Jewish issues also growing up.
In Jewish organizations? Yeah, for
Jewish
sure.
issues and organizations and causes.
Yeah. So, well, through my mom, definitely, I grew up, as my mom said, I had like a crib in the Federation office, and that's a little kind of one of those folding little playpens that I'm sure wouldn't meet any safety standards today. But so I grew up kind of in there. And also then, especially with the Soviet Jewry movement,
Mm-hmm.
we sort of always had a stream of immigrants coming through our home. And, I would know whether they were, I didn't really have an understanding, but I'd know whether they were like sort of observant or not based on whether my mom was putting out paper plates because our home wasn't kosher.
Right.
I didn't really understand kashrut either then. Or our regular dishes, and then we had labels and everything around everything in my house in English. So I kind of help her make these signs. So chair, table, we had those all over the house, and we put those up, and also sort of collect toys and things. So
I think we had very similar upbringings in that regard because my family was always involved very much Jewish issues, because I remember talking about the Soviet Jewry issue a lot, and it was like always ingrained in us, about Jewish things, and to be proud of it and follow along with that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think actually when it comes back down to it, I think that moment of like that Soviet Jewry movement was so pivotal for me, because that was, to me, that was really about Jewish unity. And I think until now, which now is a whole other thing, but I don't think that I've ever seen Jewish unity in that way since that time, until maybe now.
No, so I agree with you. Yeah, we'll discuss that after. We'll get to that definitely, because I feel the same way as you. Very many ways. So when did you first show like a talent, I guess, for writing?
A talent, I don't know.
Or an interest in it when you were growing up.
It's a lot of hard work too. I started writing, I think, poetry. My first thing that I really remember sitting down and writing was in third grade. And so growing up in my school, they had, I think maybe educationally they don't really work this way, but they had this group that was called AT, and like the academically talented, which, and I think that actually I don't think I even tested into it. I think my mother fought to get me in it, but they would pull us out and give us sort of, extra learning and the better teachers. So one of the things we had this woman, Mrs. Cover, and she would pull us out for our AT classes. And she taught us creative writing. And I was probably in about second or third grade. So the first thing I remember writing is a poem that I wrote for that. And she produced it into this book, which I think still sits in the in the in my primary school's library, bound with like wallpaper. But I still remember the poem that I wrote, and I think that it's funny because after all the things that I've written, I still think it's one of the best things I've written because I think it's me. And I think I couldn't change it or improve on it upon it. It's me.
What
And I wrote
was
it
it
when I was
about?
probably 8. Sorry.
What was it about?
So it's a poem. It's called "It's Where the Lilies Bloom." I mean, it's short. It's where the lilies bloom. I think mud slimes and crumples, birds tweet, wolves howl. I sit here and think it's where no one can read your thoughts.
There it is.
So so I think that I don't know how much better I can do today on poetry. But
Who's some of your favorite authors then? Who's some of your favorite books or your favorite authors?
Growing up,
Yeah.
I was obsessed with Little House on the Prairie, and like it's funny because I'm not somebody that really saves a lot of material things.
Right.
It don't mean so much to me, but I have my box set of my Little House on the Prairie books. And I think it's one of the few books that I did save was the Little House on the Prairie books. Also, Judy Blume,
Mhm.
Cleary, and I was obsessed with this series. It's like Lucy Finch Perkins. I feel like they're not probably politically correct. She maybe wrote in like the 1930s, but they're these twins books. And it was like the
Okay.
Dutch twins, the Chinese twins. And they were, I don't know why, I was really, really obsessed with these. They're kind of short books, and they would take you through a different country each time and present this set of twins.
That sounds very cool. That was the first name that you mentioned that I had no idea who it was. So I'm gonna have to look that
Yeah,
up.
I don't know. I was so obsessed with that. And then all the other stuff too that, when I got a little older, like, I don't know, like Flowers in the Attic, which, gosh, it's, and Stephen King. I always loved Stephen King. So.
So okay, so you were you writing that throughout your life? I mean, was there a point that it this like I'm going to start taking this seriously, or did you like leave it alone for a little bit and then come back to it?
Yeah, I think that my parents really strongly discouraged it. We had a lot of artists in my family, not artists like musicians in my family,
Okay.
and I think my parents felt that that was not, sort of this. My parents are kind of rather conservative, and I think that they felt that that wasn't really a great way to live. And they really
I,
kind of basically said to my brothers and I, you can be a doctor, a lawyer, maybe like a black sheep, he has an MBA.
I got the
So I
same
think
thing
that
about
was really
acting from my mother, by the way. Okay, sorry.
I was really discouraged in that sense. And I also I think I also didn't like, while I loved books, this might sound strange, but I don't think that I understood that like they were written by authors. Do you know what I mean? I didn't really make the
Right.
connection between the books I was reading, that this was somebody's job and this was a person. I never met an author when I was younger.
Yeah.
The first author I met was in university. I was a
Oh, well.
English and Jewish. I studied English and Jewish studies, and it was so it was the first time I ever met an author, and from then I wanted to drop out of school and become. She was a nature poet, Diane
Which author
Ackerman.
do you remember? Which was the first author?
I think it's Diane Ackerman.
Okay.
She wrote natural. I think it's Diane. In Natural History of the Senses. And she
Hmm.
came in, and I was just so taken and kind of smitten. And I
Right.
called my parents up and I said, I'm dropping out of university. I'm done with this. I'm going to be a nature poet. And my dad, without the explicative, said to me, you don't know a rat from a raccoon. What kind of nature poet are you going to be? I was going to live in a cabin and I don't know, nature poetry.
You know,
I didn't like future. He was right on that. So, and when I graduated from university, I was kind of all my roommates were in business majors, and they had these great, big five or whatever, how many consulting firms and accounting firm
right.
jobs lined up. And my parents would say to me, why don't you have a job yet? I was the top of, I was really the top of my class, and I would open, I kind of opened up like the New York Times. I was like, oh, no one's hiring a Jewish poet, so that's why I don't have a job. And I kind of just didn't really know what to do with it. I didn't really want to go into academia. I didn't really know. I really didn't want to go into teaching at all. And so after my mom yelled at me a lot, I went to law school. So
Oh, wow.
so yeah.
You mentioned the meeting the authors. I remember when I was a kid, my mind would have been blown to meet an author. I would have been like, ecstatic because I loved reading. I read all the time. I know so many authors now that I've taken my kids to when they were younger, at so many events. They
Same.
just got blasé about it. They like, they could not
Yeah,
care
yeah, yeah.
less.
Mine the same way. That's a cool.
It's-
Again, right. Another one. And it's
right.
anytime they pick a book and they're like, is that your friends? I'm like, that's my friend too.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's part of being a writer, right? They are your
Exactly.
friend.
It was very
So,
amusing. So, well, tell me a little bit about your path. When did you start getting serious about it? That you said, I'm going to take this. I want to try this. And, kind of what's your path of publication then from there?
Well, again, my path to publication is it depends on what you consider publishing. I mean, children's publishing is a different path from my path to publication outside of children's
Right.
publishing. We moved to Hong Kong. We always said that we were going to go overseas for whichever job sent us first.
Hmm.
And we were both lawyers at the time, and it was my husband's job. So we moved to Hong Kong with a 6-week-old and a 19-month-old. I put my job, I was working in New York, and I put my job on hold and said, I'm coming back definitely in 2 years. And they said, no problem, it's waiting for you. And then I wasn't going to work while we were here. A 6-week-old and a 19-month-old do require, some care, and took a lot, we had to figure out where to live. And so we figured by the time we sort of settled in, that would be year 1, and then it would just be 1 year. And then year 2 became year 3, and it looked like we might stay longer. And I said to my husband, I'm like, maybe I should go. Now I worked for the company I worked for is an insurance company, and they're also based in Hong Kong.
Oh,
And I said, maybe I should sort of knock on the door. And my husband said, and I said, and say I'm here. He said, you're a New York qualified lawyer that technically still works for them. If you do that, you're going to be working by Wednesday. He said, I'd love 2 salaries. He's like, but if I were you, you have this window of opportunity that most people never get in their life, and it's to figure out what you want to do. And he said, he's like, if I had that, I would take it. So I kind of knew that I always wanted to write. I just kind of pushed it back. So I started writing anything that I could, anything that anyone would let me write. So I got a job. I became a features editor for an architecture design magazine. I knew nothing about architecture. I know nothing about design. But I kind of felt I convinced at least the managing editor. I said, I'm a lawyer, and it's like legalese. You sprinkle some words in that sort of gives you some credibility. And I don't know I think if you can write, you can write anything,
I
really.
agree
I mean,
with you.
not so
Yeah.
well, but so I did that, and for a while, and sort of did a lot with the luxury market. It's just easy jobs to get in Hong Kong because there's such a focus on luxury and kind of things like that, which don't really appeal to me at all. But they were letting me write for them and paying me.
Oh,
And then in 2009, I opened my own magazine. Which was
oh.
definitely an adventure in publishing. So,
What was the magazine?
it's called Asian Jewish Life, and
That's what I
I
was going to
set
ask
it
you
up.
about that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so I
wait,
set it
let
up
me
as
go back a
a
second there. So you moved, so how long have you been in Hong Kong now?
over 22 years.
Oh my God. Was that, I mean, that's such a huge, huge step. I mean, were there like nerves involved at all with this?
Yeah, I mean, initially, no.
Yeah.
I think that we were young. We were young. I had a 6-week-old and a 19-month-old. I mean, I think now people say to me, it's nuts. You got in an airplane with a newborn. And I think that it was a 2-year commitment. And I really had traveled a lot. I really liked traveling. The deal was that if we were miserable, that and I was the one who would decide that. My husband's company said right off, we were moving with small babies. We could come back straight away, and he would just go back into his New York office. My job was technically still there also.
Hmm.
So I think that it didn't really seem like a risk. But, now that I think about it, traveling a 6-week-old and a 19-month-old, I don't know.
Oh, did you know, I
But,
mean, did you know
not
anything about Hong
really.
Kong ahead of time? I mean, did you,
Uh, Oh, so funny enough, it was actually my father's base for business when I was growing up.
oh, okay.
So
So
yeah, so I
you had
knew
a
a bit, but
familiarity.
yeah, somewhat, but not certainly not as an adult. And it's funny, my husband's boss was not Jewish, but he called me up when we thought we were going to go to London. It was what we kind of agreed that we were doing. So
Hmm.
in London, we had more friends, I think, at that point in London than New York, and we would have had our whole sort of Jewish life preset for us, and it'd been easy. When Hong Kong came up, my husband's boss, got on the phone with me and said, just before you start saying no, and before yeah, I mean, at this point, it was about 8 weeks before. It was about 2 weeks before I was giving birth, even. So
Oh,
and he said to me, before you yell, there's a Jewish preschool, there's a synagogue, and there's a kosher market there. I said, in Hong Kong, there's a preschool Jewish. I said, there's a Jewish preschool and a kosher market. He said, yeah. And I said, okay, then I'll do it. He said, that's it? I go, that's it. So, again, I figured if we had some basics, we'd be
right.
okay. So.
That's amazing. It's definitely amazing to me. But getting back to the other, okay, so you're the chair of the Hong Kong Jewish Historical Society. You also founded, like you just mentioned, the Asian Jewish Life. So, what is the history of Jews in Hong Kong? I mean, it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me, and I
Yeah,
also wonder
and
how
it's
is it for
funny
Jews
because
now?
I do a lot of speaking, and I think that people are a lot more aware of maybe the history of Jews in Greater China. And usually they'll just say the Shanghai, and they'll point to sort of that one period of refugees. the history in China and in Hong Kong specifically is so much bigger than that. In Hong Kong, I think that we've been a pretty quiet community. Our history is pretty quiet. I guess maybe until me, but we go back to the 1850s. So just
Mhm.
after the Opium Wars, people started to look at Hong Kong as a place, certainly for business interests, as stable. And so the community really was founded just after the Opium Wars by Baghdadi families, one Baghdadi family in particular, and it grew from there. And we've been a continuous community since the 1850s. Our synagogue was built. This is the replacement for the original synagogue. This is the third one, and it was built in 1901. So
Wow.
when our cemetery also goes back again, our cemetery is the original cemetery. It goes back to 1857.
Oh, well.
Was the original burial. So we've originally, it started as a Baghdadi community, but when you walk around the cemetery, it's still in use. You can kind of really understand sort of how the waves of immigration, sort of like Jewish history everywhere. We had waves of immigration. I mean, small, but waves of immigration. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, yeah, I know what because I'm half Mexican. I lived in Mexico as a kid for a little bit, and whenever I tell kids, my dad was Mexican Jewish, I'm like, that they're Jews in Mexico, and like it's like yeah,
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 yeah.
right. So tell me about you just mentioned before Asian Jewish Life. So that you founded that magazine. So what does that entail? In that is there enough of a readership? I mean,
Yeah. Well, I closed it. I closed it several years ago. It was in about 2008. Again, a lot of what I do is based on Jewish unity and story. And in 2008, there were the attacks on Mumbai, and my community, and I was really interested in history, and I've done a ton of reading on, sort of Jewish history in the region. And at that point, I'd been here for a number of years and was involved in the Historical Society. And I was, like any Jewish community, we have, different communities, and people won't, don't mix and sort of stay to their own, and talk maybe sometimes not always favorably about the other communities and different ways of
mhm,
worship and whatnot. So in 2008, though, when there's the attack on Mumbai, the entire community came together in well, not the entire community, but a large part of the community
right,
came together in one room, and we were watching on a large screen, the events unfold. And what I realized in that moment is, I grew up with a, strong sense in New Jersey of who my Jewish neighbors were. And I realized in that moment that everybody standing in Mumbai, those were my Jewish neighbors, New Brunswick and,
oh,
East Brunswick were my
agree.
neighbors when I was in Edison. And every single person in the room that I was in Hong Kong, and again, we were watching on this large screen. It was, a horrific evening. And everybody was 1 degree from separation from the people, that
Mhm.
ultimately were killed. So I just realized at that moment this was again, as much of a tragedy as an opportunity, to try to bring sort of, we're living in these little pockets of life in Asia, and surrounded, geographically we're far, but we're not. We have shared histories. We have a
Right.
lot of commonalities. So I wanted to try to help unify these communities, and help preserve history, and also change people's perceptions. Again, not to pick on North Americans, but a little bit about who Jews are, what we look like, and where we hail from. So.
No, it's great. And just how are things for Jews? I mean, we see anti-Semitism in many places around the world, like many places in Europe, many places here in the States. So how is it for Jews now in Hong Kong? Do you see anything? I mean, is accepting? Is it? Are you seeing any anti-Semitism things?
Yeah, so Hong Kong, again, I think that we're in a really privileged position. First of all, I've never lived anywhere where I felt that my safety as a Jew is as valued as it is in Hong Kong.
That's great.
And even like in 2014, when there was the war in Israel, I had just flown back. I was there during the war, and I flew back, and the Hong Kong government, we had people waiting on the sort of jetway to get the bus from the flight to a luggage carousel, where we were separated by space between the other luggage carousels. We had armed guards, we had dogs.
Oh,
And it wasn't that there was a threat that was greater than anywhere. It was probably less than most places, but they really value our safety. And I think the first time, as soon as there's any conflict, the first thing the Hong Kong government does is get in touch with my community,
oh,
the consul general and my community, and say, what can we do for you? What do you need from us?
oh, fantastic.
So, and again, in Hong Kong, we don't have protests. It's not something
Right,
that's done here, and so we don't see what you're seeing on the streets. I mean, I watch the news and I see it, but
right.
you don't have that here at all. It's for anything. What people have as a private opinion, I see it on social media a bit. in the press a bit, but it doesn't manifest itself on the streets. And any interaction I've had with people, I'm very visibly Jewish here because I speak Jewishly, I write Jewishly. I've done sort of like a sort of kind of quasi spokesperson for the community at times. But any interaction that I've had from people has been really positive. Any face-to-face interaction has been positive. So
That's good. Maybe I'll move to Hong Kong. So you also started PJ Library chapter there. So how did you get involved with them, and what has that been like?
Yeah, so a number of years ago, I had somebody contact me and mention PJ Library, and again, I guess the rest of the world was sort of aware of it, but we've been here for 22 years. My kids, my older children didn't grow up with PJ Library books; we didn't have access to them. And when I started to learn more about it, I first thought like, how can I make this happen? So it took me a couple of years to sort of figure it out, and I did it. We brought PJ Library here, and it's been, such a privilege. Again, I think that being able to bring Jewish literacy into Jewish homes is incredible. But I feel like it's even more important here maybe than it is in other places in the world. We can't go to a bookstore and buy a Jewish title. I mean, not that there's that many, maybe in Barnes and Noble or wherever you are now. But, we used to not be able to get out. Amazon used to not deliver here. Now they do. So to get a Jewish book here was not, into a Jewish home was no small task. So I really felt like I was and really am still doing something really important.
Fantastic. I think it's such a great organization, PJ, and everyone there has always been so nice to interact with as well. So, I saw you post recently about Judith Magazine that you started. I saw the post ahead of time, and I saw that now you're involved with it. So you're the new Kidlit editor. So can you tell me a little bit about the magazine for those who don't know what your responsibilities are and how this all came about?
Yeah, so it's a new online magazine that was established by Lisa Wald as a response to sort of the anti-Semitism in the literary world, which we're all feeling. And I think that I haven't spoken to anybody that isn't aware of this in the literary world and isn't feeling this at the moment. So sort of response to the anti-Semitism, but also on the flip side, also to sort of share and spread Jewish joy. And she had come through Hong Kong with her daughter within a sporting competition. And she had stopped she had had a stopover in Hong Kong, and she had mentioned online, does anyone know anyone Jewish in Hong Kong? And, I think all roads end up leading to me. Anyway, so I met with her in person, and she was talking about her idea, and we were talking about Kidlit, and I'm really passionate, obviously, about children's literature. I haven't been involved in it for that long, but she mentioned it to me and kind of said she was looking for a Kidlit editor, and I do a lot. I know, it's funny. People day to day say to me, "Oh, so you just write these books? They're 800 words. What do you really do? What do you do all day?" But I'm actually really busy, and at first I was kind of hesitant to take something new on, but I've learned a number of years ago to say no to most things, unless it's something that I know that I particularly can lend, my talents or my skills to. And it was still in the back of my mind. And she mentioned it that she was looking for a Kidlit editor. And finally I just said to her, well, what do I really need to do? What does it entail? And she said, really picking a book that I want to highlight really once a week and just presenting it. And I just asking for an excerpt and getting in touch with the authors. And so I'm doing that. So just really I highlight one book of interest a week. I'm really trying to, there's been a lot of interest in people reaching out to me, and it's exciting. And but I'm trying to limit it to books that really came out since the war started, since October 7th. So really books that were lost in the shuffle. I mean, there's a lot of great books that were out before that, but I'm really that's where I'm sort of looking to focus, and new books obviously coming out. So anything from that point forward is what I'm looking at. So,
well, you just touched upon it. I was going to ask you about it also, about Kidlit in general right now. So you're looking for, Jewish content, like you just said. So how do you feel? I've had many other guests, many other authors, and like you said, everyone has their stories. And there have been like lists, going around. These are the Zionists, and so watch out. But how do you feel right now for yourself? Like, how do you feel about Jews and Kidlit in general?
Well, in one respect, I felt like certainly we're in a renaissance of Jewish children's kid literature. I mean, there's books that I never even could have imagined would have been made 10 years ago. So and it's becoming more and more diverse, and there's really, every child will eventually be able to see themselves in a book. So it really is, I really do believe, a renaissance in Jewish children's literature. On the other side, since October 7th, it's been tough. I've seen the list come out, the one-starred reviews, like, the review bombing. I think that picture book authors, I think that we're a little bit insulated from that. I think that maybe people don't consider it to be, real books or real writing or real literature. I don't know, but I'm happy for it. So I'm certainly not complaining. But I still have been affected as well. I think that I came on, my first book contract was 2022. And I've been pretty prolific. I've been, really fortunate. I also have a great agent, Karen Wiseman. And I've sold a lot of books, but I haven't sold a book since October 7th. And again, it could mean I haven't written a book that's of value or good since October 7th. But, I do know that we've gotten from a publisher, from a Big Five, a response about a book that I wrote saying, it's not the right time for a book like this. And, like this, I mean, I think that most people are savvy enough to know not to put that in writing and not to even say explicitly what it means. I think that Karen did try to push back and say, what do you mean like this? The book was about Soviet Jewry. Again, that moment in time really is pivotal to me. So, we don't need a book about Soviets, or, it was Jewish is what she meant. We don't need a book. It's not the right time for a Jewish book. And so, it's not stopping. It's not discouraging me. It's sort of the opposite. So.
Yeah, I think it was happening well before October 7th. I was agenting for a while. And I sometimes, I took on many Jewish clients, Jewish content, and I would sometimes get back things like, oh, well, we already have a Jewish book. Right. So, there was definitely a limitation on Jewish content, and and forget about Israel. I mean, if you put anything about Israel, they wanted no part of it. It's just that I think since October 7th, they feel emboldened to be a little bit more open about the anti-Semitism here too. So on the same topic, so you went looking at your resume. You went to Georgetown, you went to SUNY Albany, but when you see the terrorist supporting rallies going on in those campuses now, so what goes through your mind? Because you went to like these type of schools.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad. I mean, I went to these places and I had just such wonderful experiences, specifically as a Jew on these campuses. Again, wherever I go, I tend to be very involved Jewishly. At Georgetown, I was the president, the Jewish Law Students Association. And so I had the opportunity to work a lot with faculty and with the administration, and and I was one of the only clubs that we had an actual paid professional just on the law campus helping me with the organization. And I remember the administration, each time I'd go to sort of any meeting or function or sort of in these cocktail parties that I was invited to represent the community, they would, I was always asked, like, what more can we do for you? Like, what more does your organization need? What more do Jews on campus need? And there was sort of like the sky was the limit. I said, I need kosher food on Pesach. And they said, done. Like kosher or Passover food on Pesach. And they said, done, sure. So, to see what's happening now and just, the discourse, I felt that like, both of these places, there was just wonderful, conversation and communications. We had one small incident when I was at SUNY Albany, but again, it was really small and, sort of kind of in terms of anti-Semitism, but now, to see what it's become, there's no learning. This isn't learning. This isn't academic freedom. Shouting and barring people from campus. It's scary. My daughter is going to be starting Columbia in August.
Oh, wow.
And my son, and so that's my second child, and my third is going to be starting USC in January, in LA. And we'll see. They both hopefully are ready. They say that they are. They understand what they're going to be facing, and they're both ready for it. I hope so.
Columbia is the worst of the lot right now. What I see, you and I both have kids in Israel. We recently passed the anniversary of October 7th. So let's get back into that a little bit and discuss. So how did you find out about October 7th What was the initial reaction that you had when you did?
So October 7th, again, time-wise, it was the daytime for us, and I had somebody, it was the hog already here. So some of my children observant, my husband is, I'm a little bit more flexible, and I had somebody message me. I have children serving in the army, so I have my phones on always anyway. And my daughter was here, and we watched the whole thing happening in real time, from that truck driving in. And and within 2 days, my daughter that was here got a call up for the reserves. You know, I it was sort of I guess, you try to imagine sort of your worst case scenario, and all of a sudden it is your worst case scenario for all of us. I think that, maybe I am one sort of degree closer. Well, Israeli is Israel, but, all of us, it's if there's not, a single Jew on the planet that's not been affected by this and deeply affected. And so.
Yeah, and like you touched upon before, I think definitely I feel closer. I've always been very Jewish minded, but I feel much closer to the Jewish community now than I think than I ever have. And it's like, I feel that. I feel like no matter anything else aside, I can disagree with you on all these other issues.
Yeah.
But this, I embrace you because of this. All that other stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny because that's sort of like that moment in 2008 where I made my magazine, that was sort of what the focus was, is these moments of real darkness bringing us together. But, I was involved in this initiative called Our Common Destiny, and that was in, I guess, 2019. And, the idea was, to sort of try to bring us together on these common grounds, because there's a lot more that we have in common than we have, that are differences as Jews, and to try to bring us together in a moment before a crisis. So, that was 2019. So I think that there's a number of these initiatives that had been in the works, and there will be more. But I think that it's, again, it's a terrible tragedy, and it will forever change us. But, there's also an opportunity and a reminder to us, about that we need to come together. So
I'm going back to the kids, like, you said, we both have kids in Israel. How do you ever sleep? I mean, I'm constantly
I do.
on social media.
No, I mean, also I've been back and forth a lot. My husband and I decided last year in about October, November, that the kids really needed our support. So one of us has been there almost every month since October 7th. And it's usually me, because he had the job that really, I mean, I have an office, but my office, really all I need is my computer. I mean, I like my office, but so I'm the one that's just a lot more flexible. So I've been back and forth a lot. And how I sleep, it's funny. People will see me here and say to me, "Oh, you look tired." I'm like, "Yeah, I haven't slept in 383 days." So I don't. So
well, that's why I wake up in the middle of the night, which is like already daytime in Israel, and I'm on Twitter, like, what's going on there? Let me see what's going on there too.
It's so terrible, and everyone's like, "It's bad for you." I'm like, "Of course it's bad."
Right.
But
So tell me about your new book, which it looks absolutely fascinating to me, On Chariots of Fire. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So On a Chariot of Fire came out just the week before Mixed-Up Mooncakes, I think, or I believe so. But anyway, so On a Chariot of Fire is a story that I knew I had to write from the first time I heard it. And it's the origin story of India's Bene Israel. India, it's sort of a bigger conversation, but there's a lot of groups of Jews. So again, people say, what's the history of the Jews in India? And you can't tell the history of the Jews of India in, even, in hours and hours of a call. But this origin story in particular, I love folktale and folklore and origin stories. I mean, shelves and shelves of them behind me, and this story, from the first moment I heard it, I knew that I had to write it. I originally wrote it as a middle grade short story, actually. But, it's a story of about the time of the original Hanukkah. A group of Jews, the rebellion is starting, and the Maccabees are involved in it. And a group of Jews decides that they're going to flee, and they want to keep their religion, and they want to flee, and they take, their holy scrolls and everything that's important to them, and they get on a ship. And there's this terrible, terrible shipwreck when they're out at sea. And I mean, actually a real tragedy, the ship is sunk. And there's different versions of the story, but in one, they call out, they're praying to God for help as the storm is coming. And they also, and Eliyahu Hanavi, so the prophet Elijah, is sent down from the heavens, by God to help them. And in some versions of the story, Eliyahu kind of it actually plucks some of them from the sea and places them on the shore. And so it's 7 men and 7 women are placed on the shores of kind of near Alibag, which is just not that far from Mumbai. And that's the start of this community. And they're welcomed by the local community, and they eventually, alter sort of how they dress, and they learn Marathi, but they keep their customs. And then eventually, because they keep their customs, Eliyahu Hanavi comes down to earth on his great chariot of fire. There's a witness to this, and people know who the witness is, and she sees this happen. And he comes down and just to tell the people that he remembers them, and one day they'll be returned to their home across the sea. And as he's going back up to the heavens, one of the horses slips, and there's this indentation made. I only mention one part of it in this story because, again, you're 800 words, you sort of have to funnel and filter story down. But there's indentations made on this rock, hoof prints, and also marks, the sort of chariot marks from the wheels. And it's called Elijah's Rock, and you can go and see it. There's signs from the highway that say Elijah Rock. And it's a pilgrimage site, of course, for the Jewish community, but also for, Hindus will go there just because it's seen as a holy site. So, yeah, I mean, I've been there. You can go there.
I was going to ask if you were there.
Yeah.
It sounds absolutely fascinating. I've read several books on Jews in India, and so this one appealed to me. This one really stood out. So tell me also quickly about Mixed-Up Mooncakes. That was coming out after.
Yeah, so Mixed-Up Mooncakes. Again, I have 22 years I've been living in Hong Kong, greater China, and I have Chinese children. So and the other thing is that it's here, just living in Hong Kong, like wherever you live, in the US, you have 4th of July on the calendar and Thanksgiving on the calendar. We have Chinese holidays on the calendar. And specifically, my children go to Jewish day school, and we're very involved in our synagogue here, which is modern Orthodox. So any holiday that we can incorporate, that that is not a religious holiday, we will incorporate in some way. And at least things will just sort of be an influence. So the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Chinese calendar is the same as the Jewish calendar. I do the historic tours of the synagogue. So I bring Chinese visitors in all the time. And I always say to them, I'm like, our calendars are the same, right? So Jewish holidays and Chinese holidays fall on the same cycles and the same times. And these are both harvest festivals. So depending on the leap year, there are years when these holidays fall exactly on the same day. So I thought about my own children, and my friend here, Christina, we met in SCBWI. We both had an interest in writing a story, that sort of mixed these two festivals and showed a child that's mixed. And both of us came from worlds that are mixed and have this experience in our own families. And we just came up with this idea, of these two festivals falling on the same night. And it was kind of easy from there. We're friends, and I think the writing was an easy process and enjoyable and fun. So it's and the little girl has to figure out a way to sort of bring these together. So she comes up with this creative solution on her own.
Such a fun story. I mean, I love that the combining the cultures thing. You've spoken at a lot of different conferences around the world. I was looking in Moscow as well. So what's that like traveling from place to place? I mean, going
so Moscow was great. I was there actually a couple of times for this Sefer Judaic Studies conference, and I presented papers on the Jews of Asia. I'm trying to remember specifically. I think one was I think a sort of an overall of Jews in Asia in general, and sort of the waves of migration. It was an incredible experience. I was in this entirely Russian speaking conference. I had a translator. There were a few of us presenters that were presenting in languages other than Russian. It was an incredible experience. I mean, I've had a number of opportunities. I don't think that I will anytime soon to go to Moscow. I went with Harold Grinspoon and a group that he put together.
Oh, wow.
When they were launching the program in Russian, and then also in Ukraine when they were launching the program in Ukrainian as well.
Wow.
And that was only in 2019. I think, gosh, how the world's changed since then. But I've been to Moscow again many times, and I've written a middle grade about Moscow about Moscow. So hopefully, just on submission, we'll see. So,
well, good luck with it. So I'm just so are there any places that you've been to that you felt I don't know, recent at all that have been inhospitable Jews, or it's been like the most?
No, not at all. I mean, I've done a lot of speaking. I'm always invited as a Jewish speaker, usually, but not always to Jewish audiences.
Right.
I've been to Shanghai a number of times, but like for Limoods, I helped put one together here. And I spoke for at the Jewish Museum in Shanghai, which is run by the government, but the event was sponsored by the JDC. So everywhere I've just been welcomed, but again, I'm speaking mostly to Jewish audiences for the most part. Although school visits, my school visits are much broader, and usually I'm in international schools, not Jewish schools.
So here's the question you've kind of touched before that you said you hate when people ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What are you working on next?
I did say that. Well, again, it's so hard because I don't know how other people work, but I work on so many things at one time.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So I do a lot at one time, but first I have a bunch of books coming out. I've 2 books coming out in 2025 and 2 books coming out in 2026. Again, only one has been announced. It's a Hong Kong, it's called Lily's Hong Kong Honey Cakes, and it's a story. So working on this one now because I'm sort of on the last look at sketches before they're finalized, and trying to source a couple of historical photos. I just need to get the permissions on those. So yeah, if you're the organizations that I'm asking, please, I need the permissions. So that one's the story of a little girl that's born in Vienna, and they own a bakery, and she traveled, and the story goes through 10 years of her life from when they have to flee Vienna and they get on a ship and they end up in Shanghai, and then from there they end up in Hong Kong. So I did a lot of the original research on this group that ended up we're sort of stranded in Hong Kong for about 9 months. So that's coming out. It's Behrman House, so Apples and Honey, and that's out, I believe, the fall of 2025. And then I have 3 other unannounced deals. I could just say one is Chinese and Jewish, and one is Indian and Jewish. And
fantastic.
But otherwise, I'm working on a new middle grade right now, which I'm trying to contemporary. I don't know. I love historical, but I feel like historical is a tough sell right now, whether a Jewish book or not. So I'm sort of working on a contemporary. Again, it'd still be very Jewish. The child still will have moved from Hong Kong sort of before the story starts. So I'm not going to altogether abandon that. But and then also, a number of picture books. So sort of in various stages.
You definitely are prolific.
I have a number of books on submission. I think I have 4 books on submission or something.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Well, it's been slow though. 5 maybe.
Yeah, you sound like you're slacking off there. So the all-important question, how can people follow you on social media?
So social media, I think probably today it's probably Instagram as my best. Erica Lyons writes. I'm on Twitter still, though I shouldn't be, but I'm still on EF. It's EF Lyons is my Instagram handle. I'm still trying to find the perfect, replacement for Twitter, but until I do, I'm there. And Erica-Lyons .com is my website. Sometimes update my blog, but not always on there. But I'm
your website's fantastic, by the way.
Thanks.
You have so many great things, and your blog is really good. I mean, it's updated frequently, and there's so many good stories.
I didn't think anyone read it.
I went through it before.
I was going to say, I don't think anyone read it, but I did write a post, and I ended up doing the interview for the Jewish Chronicle in London based on a post. And I was kind of shocked. I didn't know anyone ever read it, but apparently 2 people have read my book.
Well, I'm one. So, yeah. And by the way, Twitter to me is invaluable. I will not leave Twitter. It's like
I know, me too. So we'll be the last people there. We'll turn off the lights.
Exactly. Well, Erica, I want to thank you again for coming on. It's a real pleasure getting to meet you and talk with you. We conversed a little bit during the week, but it was, definitely a fan. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
Again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. And again, a very special thanks to Erica Cohen Lyons. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.